In other words, we're going to have these chronic ailments that we're seeing so much in the West, and we're going to have these brilliant solutions, but the solutions are different than the cause, right? I'm not sick because I'm lacking stem cell therapy treatments, right?
Yeah.
I'm sick because of certain things, right? That I'm doing, that I'm thinking, that I'm believing, right? That my environment is not providing. And so when I realize the core of what's really happening, then I can correct that, and I can use stem cell therapy or whatever the heck it might be down the pike. So it's like, when you get this in alignment, your life can be better. You don't fall into chronic ailments as much, and we still can hopefully benefit from these really cool technologies and ideas that are coming down the pike.
What if aging isn't about slowing down, but leveling up? I'm Dr. Isaac Jones, one of the world's leading longevity doctors and someone that's invested millions of my own money into cracking the code on longevity. This is the Longevity Leaders Podcast. Join me and my co-hosts, Dr. Rudy, Dr. Ashley, as we interview the world's top doctors, scientists, and practitioners, sharing the latest breakthroughs in longevity and regenerative medicine. If you're ready to optimize your health, your performance, and your longevity, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Longevity Leaders Podcast. I'm Dr. Isaac Jones, and this episode is part of our exclusive series recorded at the Exponential Longevity Summit, a global gathering of cutting-edge health experts exploring the edge of human performance, health span, and longevity. Let's get into it.
Welcome to this incredible interview. I've got Jason Prall here. He is a world's leading researcher and expert in longevity. We're going to be talking about how to really customize longevity, the conversation of longevity to you. We're going to talk about, what are some of the universal truths around longevity? What are some things that fluctuate and change? And how can we really apply these thought principles and technologies to our own lives to get the best results? And the other thing that we're going to talk about is some core foundational definitions and principles that I think are critical to you, really understanding this longevity and quote unquote anti-aging space. We're going to get into that as well in a second. But Jason, why don't you just share a little bit about yourself? You've got an incredible documentary, one of the top longevity, if not the top longevity documentaries out there. And just, tell us a little bit about how you got to where you're at.
Yeah, like many of us, my story started off with kind of this pain to purpose, scenario, and I suffered from a lot of health challenges. Right when I was younger, I had chronic knee pain that started at 13 that lasted, 25 years or so. Went the traditional routes, went all kinds of alternative routes, and couldn't really figure out what was at the origin of that. And then I had a skin condition in college that, and these two things weren't. I mean, in a way they were major, but they weren't debilitating in a huge sense, but they led me down a path of discovering that the Western medical system is not equipped to deal with chronic ailments. They don't know how to think about them. There's no training involved, right? So this was, when I was in college, it was the early 2000s, right? So the internet was fairly nascent, right? It was like web crawler and Yahoo, and there wasn't, social media, which is where we disseminate a lot of our information, good or bad. There was chat rooms, right? Like I was in these deep chat rooms learning from random people around the world about their health thoughts, right?
Yeah.
And that was, I discovered more there. Like there was more questions posed to me that made me think, right? And I had to figure out what was true and what wasn't. Some of it was through self-experimentation. Some of it was through just my own discernment and ability to, sort of navigate those waters with, logic, right? But that propelled me into a world of what we call natural health, alternative health, and understanding really what was kind of going on, right? And it also led me to the corruption and the deep evil really that runs through a lot of these systems, right? The people that are in them are good people, most of them, right? Overwhelming majority, right? But the systems themselves are so corrupt. They're so they in my opinion, especially at that time, they couldn't be saved, right? In other words, what I saw at that point was such deep corruption spread throughout so many different organizations related to food, related to environment, related to medicine, insurance, money, right? That that the way out, I thought at that time, and I kind of still believe this, which is we must extract people from those systems. We must show them a way and empower them in order to take care of themselves, in order to find new systems to build, right? This is kind of the old Buckminster Fuller strategy, right? The thing is so corrupt, it's so damaged that we must create new ways. And so that was that propelled me from a career in engineering into, functional integrative health. And I don't say medicine, right? Because I never practiced medicine. It was really about how do I help people get healthy, right? And so I kind of did that in my own way, but through functional medicine, through integrative training, through functional neurology, through Ayurveda, through naturopathy, right? Through all, and some chiropractic, just in terms of the ideology and how to think about the body, right? This all framed my perspective when I was working with clients, right? So I worked with a lot of people that had cancers and autoimmune conditions and a wide variety of health concerns. Some of them that had, unknown syndromes, right? That didn't have names. And some of them had multiple names that didn't seem to be a correct diagnosis, right? So that was really what propelled me into the health world. And in that is that's where I cut my teeth, right? I understood what was working, what wasn't working, right? Because it's interesting, when we read a lot on the internet and we listen to a lot and we start to feel like we have a grasp on something, and especially with something that works for us, it's really only till you start applying that knowledge or wisdom to other people that you really understand the complexities of what's going on with most people's health. And I wasn't, there were certain things I was pretty good at working out. And there's other things that I was totally ill-equipped for, right? I did not know how to understand or diagnose, I didn't diagnose, but really describe or handle like things like trauma, right? Deep-seated traumas, right? So I didn't, at that time, that led me into the world of trauma. So I started to uncover so many more layers to this puzzle, right? And so that was kind of the origins. And through those discoveries, I realized that I was teaching people so much of the same stuff that I wanted to, instead of working one-on-one with people, reach a wider audience. So that's kind of why I created the Human Longevity Project, to dispel some of these ideas and to give people a framework through which to operate.
That's incredible. Well, I mean, what you just talked about is so powerful. And the fact that emotional trauma is also a big deal when it comes to longevity and our health. I remember, I was at Sensei, which is this, this resort in Hawaii. Lani is the island it's on. And I was getting a treatment called Watsu, which is like shiatsu, like a flowing kind of massage, but in the water. And, I had broken out in tears in this treatment, and I didn't realize like what happened until after, where I was like in this relaxed kind of altered state over top, like there's palm trees over top me. The sun is kind of beating down through the leaves. I'm in this warm water. I'm doing this treatment, and like these traumas came back.
Yeah.
And that I didn't even remember that were serious. And I almost released it in the context of this Watsu treatment, which was very interesting. But then I went back home and started to do deep inner healing and work on this, and that was the start of it. So and a lot of people, I think we don't even realize how much like the trauma can impact our health and our life. So I would love to get into, the Human Longevity Project. Like what are some of the key elements of that? And then like I think we should talk a little bit about trauma healing as well, and just like what that can look like as well.
Yeah. And I'll start there because, what you brought up is very interesting, right? Many of us don't think we have traumas, or don't think our traumas are that bad, or I had a good childhood and I had great parents and all these things.
Yeah.
And while that can be a true statement, and the whole reality of coming into this world is this traumatic experience. And I don't just mean in the birth process, but that in and of itself is a traumatic experience. The reason that we all have trauma is because of the stages of development, when we are young, when we are in our youth, when we are babies, when we are so tiny, we don't have the capacity to understand what's happening. We're just going by our feelings. And so often, if we don't get breastfed, if we get, just neglected in a way that wouldn't even seem like neglect other than to an infant, then we are going to react, right? And we react in the body, right? So the body is constantly picking up these signals, and each individual is different. There are people that are more sensitive to some of these things. So all of us experience trauma, right? And then, of course, we have our very well-known sort of named traumas and well identifiable traumas that, the ACE study, for example, would identify. And there was 10 traumas, I think, right? Like parents are arrested, divorce, neglect, abuse, right? There's a handful, and they only named 10, and they found that all of these traumas had a massive impact on your health in a wide variety of ways. So we can name some of these, but then there's other things, like if you remember back to your school days, right? Maybe you got picked on a little bit, or maybe even just you got called upon. Maybe there's a teacher that was just calling upon you, didn't know the answer, and there was this fear in the system of not being accepted by the class, right, or whatever. So there's all of these things. And then there's this whole other classification that is in the sort of trauma sphere, which is the conditioning aspect. Maybe you had wonderful parents that pushed you, right? There's certain cultures actually that are kind of known for this, right? Certain Asian cultures or Indian cultures and others too, that really push their kids, right, to excel, to succeed. And so even that, while very can be a very good thing for a lot of reasons, can also be very difficult for a child to handle, right? So even these conditionings that we experience that are resulting in very, very positive aspects of our life, for a developing child that doesn't have the awareness, doesn't have the conceptual framework to understand these things at 5, at 7, at 10, and 12, the brain isn't even fully developed, right? So these are all the things that really create us as adults. And your experience is a perfect example where it wasn't even this deep trauma healing sort of work. And yet, when the body is able to find safety, and when it is able to, generally in the presence of another is a good thing. You need another nervous system to kind of hold you a little bit. But when the body can finally find safety in certain circumstances, these things can process, and they process through us, right? So we're holding on, we're gripping onto these things, these experiences, because at the time that they were formed, we didn't have the consciousness, we didn't have the awareness, we didn't have the capacity to process those fully, right? And so we deal with them as best we can as children, but we can't fully, right? Unless we have another nervous system. This is the primary role of parents or guardians in that sort of scenario, is to be able to help the child process, right? So when a child is crying, an infant, right, they want to breastfeed. Well, that it's not just because they're hungry, right? Sometimes yes, but sometimes it's literally just to borrow a nervous system to be able to process these things that are coming up in their system. And 100% of us have gone through life and had experiences that we have yet to be able to process. And so this sort of trauma work, this ability to process all the backlog of stuff and the conditioning, is a part of the nervous system being able to find parasympathetic rest. And so we all have a degree of parasympathetic capacity, you could say. We're all at different levels. So even when I feel like I'm totally relaxed and restful and on a beach and just so happy, and finances are taken care of, jobs taken care of, families taken care of, everything's good, my nervous system can only relax to its sort of baseline set point. But as I do some of this work, as I start to clear some of this stuff and process some of it, now I find a deeper level of rest, right? So this is critical when it comes to our lifelong health.
That is so good, because literally I'd say 2 months later, like I had went in a talk to like this counselor about like the stuff that came up for me, and it just like released so much.
It's
like
wild.
It was wild. But the crazy thing that you just mentioned, which was so interesting, is that I started feeling like every day was the best day. And I was like, whoa, I just feel like this is the best day of my life. Like, I don't know how it could get any better. And like before, like a month before, I'd be like, oh, I need to, push harder. I need to, and there was this like release, this like contentment and joy and love and happiness. And like things were happening more effortlessly. I truly hear you on the like set point of your nervous system and how you can like bring it to a new level. Can you share some breakthrough strategies? Like like, I'm sure, like, even I would say the set point for the parasympathetic is, and your nervous system is a set point. There's also a set point probably in your longevity as it relates to trauma. So like,
100%.
if you don't address the trauma, then you can't live past a certain date and time. Do you know what I'm saying?
100%. Yeah. And of course, we'll never scientifically prove that sort of thought, but I guarantee that what you're saying is true. It's because every aspect of healing, of regeneration, right? Stem cell production, all the things that we think about, we can go down these rabbit holes in the longevity world. That's all regulated primarily by the nervous system, right? So the nervous system must be in a parasympathetic state. And then not only can you get there, but can you stay there, right? So you're what you were saying is perfect, right? Like, and this is what you see with the yogis, with the saints, with the great spiritual masters. They have done enough work, spiritual, religious work, to be able to rest and relax no matter what storm is around them. So they're literally just resting in the eye of the storm. And so can we stay there, right? So can we get into a deeper aspect of rest? And then can we stay there as we walk through life, right? This is the art of living. And so when we do that, then we can heal better. We don't create as much imbalance in the body, right? And all of this, by the way, is directly related to your biology, right? It is 100% affecting. And a good example of this is if you have ever spoken on a stage, or if you've ever thought about speaking on a stage or given a presentation in a classroom, right? Generally, most of us, even experienced speakers, will get up on a stage and there's some nerves that kick in. Body temperature rises, heart rate increases. You might start sweating a little bit more. Your thinking might get a little foggy. You might get tunnel vision. You might blank out, right? This is a physiological, biological response to an idea, to a conditioned idea that when you get up on stage, if you make a mistake, if you aren't as smart as you want to appear, if you have something on your face, whatever the case is, that you're not going to be accepted by the group. There's a lack of safety in that, right? So we are perceiving a threat based on our conditioning, right? There's a survival mechanism that starts to kick in, right? So this, and maybe this is a good sort of, I can tie in here to some of these universal truths, because one of the aspects here, that the way I like to look at these universal truths, because there's essentially, in order to maintain health, in order to hopefully live a long time, God willing, there are universal truths to this human meets act, to our biology, to who we are. And it starts, I like to look at this in the frame of development, right? And we can use the psychological framework here, right? The first stage of development, when we're infants, what we need, our primary need, we need many things, but the primary need is safety, right? So when we can feel safe. So this is absolutely critical in the trauma piece as well. So whenever we're working with trauma, whenever we're trying to process something, we need safety. It is primary. If you don't have safety, you cannot process certain things. You cannot process most things. And of course, there's a level. It's not like no safety and safety. There's a sort of range, right? So however safe you feel, that gives you the space, the room to be able to process. So that is primary. And it is primary for our health and longevity. We need safety. That safety is setting the bar for our nervous system. When we don't feel safe, right? I've had many instances I can think of in my life as an adult where my finances were a little sketchy, where I was in certain situations and it was like, or I was late for delivering a project, whatever the case might be, my nervous system starts to perceive that the world is not safe. And so it gets jacked up a little bit, right? Sleep might get disturbed, digestion isn't as good, detoxification isn't as good, brain isn't clearing as fast, right? Like all these things that we can think about aren't working as well because my baseline safety levels from my perception aren't there. So first we need safety, right? The next stage of development, the main thing that we need is connection. We must feel connection, right? And we can think about this, in a variety of ways. A lot of people like to say community. Community is a kind of a loaded word in my opinion, because you can be in a community, quote unquote, and feel totally disconnected from that community. Right. And we have this now with the online world. You can have online communities, and when you feel a connection to that community, that's the main thing, and the safety. So what does community provide? It provides connection and safety. So what we're really needing first safety, then connection. Same thing in the trauma world. We need to find that safety. And so let's imagine we're working with some kind of practitioner. We need to feel safe in what they're doing and who they are and what they're doing to me or for me. And then there needs to be some level of connection to the process, to the person. But when you feel that connection, and this is an embodied sense that you may or may not even fully cognize, right? Because there's certain defense mechanisms that can come in that are deep within us that can prevent this sort of connection. And a good analogy here, or something I can point to, is like the standard rom-com, right? So the prototypical rom-com where you have the female lead and the male lead, and typically they start to come together and there's a relationship that's happening. And then one of them, usually the female lead, starts to come on pretty strong, right? And the male lead usually has this mechanism where they start pulling away, right? So these are sort of attachment styles. But what's happening is generally, again, I'm really generalizing based off of the movies here, but the female lead is so afraid that the male lead is going to sort of disconnect or move away from that relationship, that they press even harder, right? So there's this reaching out, right? And then the male lead feels that and goes, "Oh my God, there's a perceived threat in this relationship, because relationships have generally been unsafe or have created harm." So he's afraid of getting too close. So he backs away. Well, then what does the female lead? Feels that and goes, "Oh my God," and chases harder, right? And then it's just this tug of war of like, they're just chasing each other in this whole process, right? And so and this happens in our day to day, right? This can happen with authority figures. This can happen with children. This can happen with loved ones of all kind. Is that we have these defense mechanisms, and both of those are defensive strategies in this sort of attachment style. So when we don't feel connection, we can't process as well, right? And here's the cool thing, right? Here's the really cool thing. And this is what we noticed in the longevity regions around the world, is that they all had this community that was deeply embedded with connection. So there's so much connection, and there was a safety in the community. You think about 70, 80 years ago in Ikaria, Greece, right, which is an island, they didn't have electricity, right? So they were very much dependent on one another. This person's growing these foods, that person's growing these foods. They're all supporting each other in this process. When the weather isn't as good, the famine hits, when war starts, whatever the case, whenever some trouble was on the horizon, they had each other's back. So that provided that safety. But there was a deeply sense of connection in all of the communities, right? In Okinawa, in Sardinia, in the Guanacaste regions of Costa Rica. And so when you have safety, when you have connection, you can process so much more. And this becomes critical for all of our health, right? So these two things in the developmental process, in the trauma processing world, are really important for our everyday life. We need to feel connected. And the cool thing is it doesn't necessarily have to be with another human. There is a value in human-to-human connection in so many ways. So having great friends that you can really rely on, spouses, core family unit, all of this is great. And we can have connection with pets. We can have connection with other animals. We can have connection with God. We can have connection with nature. Whatever you can feel connected to. I can sit here by myself in meditation, in prayer, in ultimate connection. Right. And I can point to like the monks, right? I was in the Himalayas. We were working with the Buddhist and bone healers up in the Himalayas. Literally, they're sitting, meditating, doing their work like 15 hours a day, right? In essence, they're in isolation, when it comes to human contact. There's a few of them, and they're sort of together in a sense, but they're not, drinking tea together, talking. Like there's no interpersonal connections. That's not the big part of what they do. They're connected to all that is. Right. And so we can do this as individuals. We just need to recognize that we are always connected and tap into that. So these are the sort of two primary characteristics that we must have if we want to live a long life, if we want to be healthy, if we want to heal, if we want to process trauma. It's all embedded in these main two things.
And is part of connection physical touch? Like, is it
100%? I mean, there's something special about our bodies, right? And you have this with hands-on healers. You might be a massage therapist, a chiropractor, might be a craniosacral worker. There's all kinds, but there's something magical about our touch and specifically our hands, right? So we can get kind of off into some interesting territory with that discussion, but we all know this. Like if you just feel, right? There's something magical when somebody touches you in a certain way. it makes your whole system just melt, right? This is why we hug. This is why we hold hands. This is why we touch. I mean, think about your kids. Like, can you imagine having a loving relationship and not like touching them?
Yeah. Hemel Patel came and spoke at our last longevity event in Austin, and he was talking about, what he calls Heelys, which are people that like put their hands on others. And, he was talking about how there's this group of people that had breast cancer, and the results of the pre and post of how these people reverse breast cancer just from having people essentially meditate, visualize, and pray over them with their hands too, not obviously touching their breast, but like touching their bodies, was just like, is just so amazing to hear that's that's possible. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to ask that, was just I feel like so connected, to my wife when we were like embracing each other, and it's just like, it's a powerful something in my nervous system, is like, it like you said, it's like safety, you know what I'm saying? It's
100%.
like a primal, unconscious thing that we probably don't even realize all of the power that it actually.
That's just it, right? So we all have that capacity inherently without even thinking, and it can be cultivated, right? Like we can actually increase. So even when you hug your wife, let's say the normal way, like on your day to day, and then you hug her in a different way, you bring awareness to your heart, to your seat, to your butt, right? In other words, you bring yourself into your body. You feel the love and connection.
Wow.
This is how magical we are, right? We have awareness. We can direct this awareness. We have intention, right? So we can do these things, and it can be cultivated, right? So
same
just
hug,
like
same hug,
exactly,
it's the same person, but all like but the difference is your awareness around the hug that completely changes
everything.
Neurochemistry, biochemistry of whatever gets released in your body. Like, wow, that's really powerful, actually.
100%. Yeah. And again, the fact that we can cultivate this it's like it's like piano players, right? If I sat 100 piano players down who'd never touched a piano, 100 people, and they all learned at the same time, went through 6 months of training with the same teacher, there would be certain individuals that excel, that naturally are better from the start. So yes, we have these certain people that just have a bit more of this gift. And we can all cultivate this gift. We can all practice this. And this is probably the art of longevity, I think, that we can all do more of.
I was just about to say, I'm like, we could talk about all the supplements, all the exercise, biohacking technologies that are out there, all of this and that. And this is what you just shared, as simple as it is the most profound. This is principle-based longevity, right? Safety, and then not just community, but connection. And then being in a state of awareness around your connection that creates a new like level of health and vitality for you. This is huge.
Honestly, the key is awareness, right? So this is something we can all practice. So if I'm sitting here and I'm in my head, I'm in my work, I'm not really paying attention to what's happening in the body, then things are going to be operating in the background. The body has unbelievable intelligence and wisdom. And if I use my awareness, I can actually start to track, oh, I'm actually feeling a little bit stressed right now, right? And I can use my awareness to calm that down, right? So when we start using our awareness on a minute by minute basis, on a constant basis, we can really start to track, am I hungry, right? What do I need? Right? What's lacking right now? When we were going through COVID, there was an interesting period where we were all kind of locked inside our houses, some states more than others. And, I remember thinking at first, like, oh, kind of a vacation, right? This will be fun. We can all connect. And then it got to this point of like, oh my God, like this is horrendous. And I started eating certain foods that I normally don't eat as often. And I started putting on a little weight, and I sat with it. I'm like, what's going on here? And what I realized was that I was missing that connection piece. I was missing the ability to interact. I love being in physical connection with others. So that I like to be around them, right? And the sort of Zoom world that we were living in at the time just wasn't doing it for me. And what I realized with awareness, with not even a deep meditation, I just kind of sat and said, what am I feeling? What's happening here? And what I realized is that's what I was missing. So I was looking for the connection in food, right? Which is not a normal pattern for me, right? It can be very common for some people. So it's not a normal pattern. And I realized like, oh my gosh, this is what it is. And so once I realized with awareness what was actually happening, then I can come up with the right solution, right? So this can be a big tool, and practicing with awareness is It's cultivated, right? You may not understand what you're doing at first, right? But you can literally just start tracking, even when you feel hungry, using your awareness. Am I hungry? Am I thirsty? What am I hungry for? Right? How much do I need to feel to alleviate this hunger? Right? These type of things, it's so foundational. And so it's not that you must do this stuff, right? It's just that if you do these things, your life will improve, your health will improve, your relationships will improve, your money will improve, your business will improve, because you start to really feel into where you're being called, what you're being drawn to. And you mentioned the supplements and there's amazing things coming down the pike with regard to regenerative medicine, right? We have a really cool future with longevity.
Yeah.
And my whole thing with the Human Longevity Project was like, okay, yes, all that's great, but let's get the foundations in place first, because if we are disregarding that, if we're unaware of it, then we're just going to start chasing these rabbit holes, and we're going to go round in circles. In other words, we're going to have these chronic ailments that we're seeing so much in the West, and we're going to have these brilliant solutions, but the solutions are different than the cause, right? I'm not sick because I'm lacking stem cell therapy treatments, right?
Yeah.
I'm sick because of certain things, right? That I'm doing, that I'm thinking, that I'm believing, right? That my environment is not providing. And so when I realize the core of what's really happening, then I can correct that, and I can use stem cell therapy or whatever the heck it might be down the pike. So it's like, when you get this in alignment, your life can be better. You don't fall into chronic ailments as much, and we still can hopefully benefit from these really cool technologies and ideas that are coming down the pike.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible. So I would love for you just to share a little bit more about this is the core of trauma healing, I suspect, but also like we'll integrate this into trauma healing, but like what did you uncover in the Human Longevity Project that is very interesting when you started going around the world learning from all these people that are centenarians, excuse me, and that have lived these long, healthy lives, and it's a culture of, it's like their grandkids will live long, healthy lives, right?
Yeah. Well, there were some interesting things, right? Most of the stuff I kind of already had a framework for when we were going in, right? So I was leading sort of the production, so I kind of knew what we were going to produce, and I knew how they lived. So I knew a handful of things. I'd say most of the things that they were doing, I had a good idea of what to expect. But there was a couple of things that caught me off guard. One was in Costa Rica. It was our first trip, and we were working. We were down there for 10 days. I speak a little bit of Spanish, but not great Spanish. And it's not like there's a list of 100-year-olds that we can just, look up in the, online, database. Yeah. We had to go down there and just start talking to people and be like, hey, do you know any 100-year-olds, right? And so it was kind of a stressful scenario to be in, right? We were up against the clock. We had all this film gear. I had to find a translator, right? So it was a whole thing, right? So theoretically, this should have been a fairly stressful kind of normal work environment, right? But what I realized when I was down there is, because of the environment, the way it's structured, and it's not structured in any particularly interesting way. It's just basic, right? They're very rural. They're very down to earth, right? They don't have a lot of technology. And so in that environment, and just the way that they behave, my whole system like found a new pace. So this is what I didn't realize. Time seemed to expand when I was down there, right? So we would get up and we'd have our morning, Costa Rican coffee, right? And it was just so good. We're sitting there and kind of relaxing. And I'm like, oh man, we probably should start getting to work. And we would look at the clock and it'd be only like 7:30, right? And I'm like, oh, we're actually fine. And then we'd walk to the store to get some food or whatever. So it was like the pacing dictated my entire reality. So it's like if I'm used to driving 60 miles an hour, right? And then I go down this rural dirt road. Well, if I go 60 miles an hour on this rural road with maybe a couple other cars there too, and they're going 20, that's not a good scenario, right? Like, it's actually dangerous to go 60 when everybody else is going 20 and the roads are only designed for 20. But if I'm used to driving 20 and I now go onto a 4-lane highway here in the States and everybody's going 70, well, it's dangerous to go 20. So this is what I realized in this process, was that's where we're at in the Western world, most of the Western world, right? There's still a lot of rural areas and people are going slower, but most of the Western world is going at this breakneck pace, and it's because everybody else is, right? Like, And it's actually really a challenge for me knowing this, because I've got emails, I've got people calling me, I've got a million things, and because everybody else is operating at this pace, right? So that pace that is surrounding me, right, with my kid and wife and work, and the way our whole pace is here in the States, that is going to dictate my reality to a large degree. And just being in that environment and going at the pace, and it wasn't even a conscious thing. We were operating at the pace that the environment was going at, right? So that my whole system calmed down. And then we flew back and we landed in Houston airport, and I immediately felt this like frantic pace. And that had never really happened to me before. Wow. I've traveled a lot. For whatever reason, there was just something so unique about that. Literally just landing. We hadn't even gone through customs. Excuse me. We haven't gone through customs yet. And I was feeling like I turned on my phone, the ding, 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 all these things coming through, right? Like, so this was a huge part of this reality, is that every place we went to, they had this pace of the environment. Now, that pace is changing because of the westernization of all of these places. But it helped me get a glimpse into the reality that they grew up in. And by the way, this is only a glimpse, because if a lot of people we talk to are 90, 100 years old, they grew up in a 1930s environment, 1940s environment, right? As children. So no electricity, no cars. So even what I saw was sped up compared to what they were used to. You go at the pace of nature, right? Plants grow at the pace of nature, right? Everything around you is the seasons, the nature, the days. So you're literally operating at the pace of nature, and you can't go fast. You can't really work at night, right? Like you operate by what reality is dictating. So that was a huge one.
How do you bring that into the Western world?
Simply recognizing that, right? So simply recognizing that is important, because then you recognize, okay, I'm actually driving 70 miles an hour here on this road. Now, can I slow this down? Do I want to slow this down? That's a different question, right? I look at somebody like, I don't know, Gary Vee might be a good example, right? He's fairly well known. The guy goes a million miles an hour, he's doing a million things, and he just won't stop. Now, to me, that's horrendous. I could never live like that, right? And there's certain people, they spin up companies, they start a new venture, spin up another companies, and I'm like, oh my God, that's just way too fast for me. I don't want to live that life, right? But they may. So there's a choice point. Like when you start to recognize what's actually happening, then you can make the informed choice. So it's
interesting you said that, because I follow these people that have built a few billion-dollar companies in this podcasting group. I don't want to out them, but I've followed them for like 3 years now. So 3 years ago, I'm watching their podcast. It's on YouTube, and they're billionaires. They look like, these young guys. And then 3 years later, I saw them, doing an interview with Elon Musk, like a couple weeks ago. And I kid you not, they looked like they aged 10 years or 20 years in 3. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that guy's hair's turned white and he lost a lot of the hair on the top of his head. That guy's got wrinkles, like big, huge bags under his eyes. It's like they live in Silicon Valley, it's so, yeah, I mean, it was very interesting to just recognize that. And there's a cost, right? There's a cost. If you want to push it's kind of like that movie Click with Adam Sandler, where he just wanted to fast forward his life to the end. But it's like, if you want to live at 70 miles an hour, 100 miles an hour, then your life is going to be shrunk down, kind of thing.
100%. And this is the thing, like if we can recognize these things, we can make a choice. Some of these people, most of us, most of my life, I was just caught up in this reality. I wasn't aware of any of this, right? So I was operating. Yeah. You're just operating at the pace at which your environment sort of tells you to operate, right? And this is the other thing about trauma, is that we're conditioned by our environments. We're conditioned by our culture, right? So this is one of the reasons why culture is actually important, because it conditions us, and the ability to disassociate from culture when it doesn't agree with your core values and who you are, right? So we get conditioned, we start operating, we start driving 70 miles an hour, and we don't even know that we're driving a car, right? So that's part of it, is just recognizing. And then once you figure out who you are, you may be somebody who thrives, who truly thrives. Some people just think they thrive, but who truly thrives in that environment. And this is what they love. They love going at this breakneck pace. Now, if that's the case, then this sort of the fulfillment that you gain, the meaning that you have, right? The happiness that comes from it can actually be a benefit, right? But many of us are not operating in that way consciously. Now, if we recognize what we truly desire from our core, then we can make these choices, right? So for me, I don't even remember when I did this, but I'm off social media. I don't have Instagram on my phone. I don't have Facebook. I mean, I do, but I don't use it, right? So I don't use TikTok or any of these other things.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not demeaning those, right? Those are fantastic marketing tools. They're great for people to get a message out. They're fantastic in so many ways if used correctly. But for me, it's not what I wanted. So at some point in the past, I don't even remember how long ago, I just got rid of that stuff because I realized it's actually not doing something for me that I feel is good. So you can make those, you can simply turn off notifications on your phone. You can organize your email inbox in a certain way. You can organize your calendar in a certain way, right? So there's just a more conscious way that you can walk through the world. Granted, I'm still operating in this sort of Western way, but I get to start to analyze and figure out where my values are and what I truly want once I have this recognition.
My gosh, this is so powerful. I mean, this is like the core, truly the foundation of longevity, living a long, healthy life. We've got like a few minutes left here. What would you say the best trauma healing strategies, solutions are, technologies? You know, like obviously I wasn't expecting Watsu to do that for my nervous system, but like what would you say that they are?
Yeah, I would say there's a couple things that you can do on your own, right? So I would say prayer and meditation, those two things, and they're a little bit different, right? So it's funny because I have some friends that are religious, and they're like, oh, I don't want to meditate, doesn't agree with my religion. And I have some people that are like, I'm not into religion, I'm not going to pray, right? And I'm like, they're two different things, right? So what you pray to may be a personal choice. That's fine. But prayer is to something higher, right? So you're asking, you're connecting with, you're communing with the divine, right? Well, and that can be nature if that's your thing. But connecting and communing and having a relationship with something bigger than yourself, right? That's how I would sort of define prayer. And so that is really, really powerful, because what you're telling your system, what you're telling your body is that I'm not alone, that I have something greater than myself that's actually got my back, right? So that's really powerful, right? And when you do that, again, that provides safety, that provides the connection. And when you provide safety and connection, things can process. And the beautiful part about trauma processing is that most of it is not conscious, right? The conscious part, I would say, is more like the reprogramming, and that's a fantastic tool. But when we want to process things that we're not even aware of, we can't actually take control of that. We actually have to rest and let the things just naturally happen. And there's great gifts, just like your experience. You weren't expecting that. You weren't going in for that. It just happened. And then once it happened, you can actually have realizations about what processed, or about the things that you were missing because that hadn't been processed, right? So that's the gift on the other side of trauma healing. So it doesn't even have to be painful. It can be totally beautiful. And then the other thing I would say on a solo mission is the meditation, right? And meditation, there's a lot of forms, but at its basic level is just quieting the mind, getting out of the monkey mind and resting in the body, in the awareness. So you can use awareness in a variety of ways. And again, there's so many different meditation techniques, and you can find one that works for you. I did Vipassana meditation, which is not connected to any deities. It's not connected to anything. It's just scanning the body with your awareness. And it provided so many benefits, right? So there's all kinds of different things you can do. But if you do those two on your own and make it a regular practice, because this is a big part of it, is doing it on a regular basis and being consistent with this. And it doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be every day, but just maintaining some kind of consistency and developing a habit out of that. Those are huge. Most of the really deep trauma work will involve another being, right? It'll involve another human, right? So one of my favorites is called adult attachment repair model. This is, it's hard to even explain, but there's really not much that's happening like in sort of human to human world, but you connect through a stick oftentimes or some other mechanism. So you don't even have to touch the other person, but there's a connection point that you can feel. And this actually provides a somatic safety mechanism. And eventually, if the practitioner is good, your body will still start recognizing deeper and deeper levels of safety and trust and connection. And when, again, those are the foundations. So if you're developing greater levels of safety, greater levels of connection, then more and more can be processed. And usually with trauma healing, it's an incremental approach, gradual approach. Now, there can be some big explosions along the way, which are fantastic, but usually it's this kind of peeling back the onion, and you continue to go deeper and deeper, and there's no end to this game. We just keep going and going, and every time you do, you get deeper levels of realization, you get deeper levels of well-being, you get deeper levels of body health, right? So I don't care if you've got liver issues, if you've got blood sugar issues, if you've got autoimmune conditions, skin issues, whatever the case is, when the body is able to find safety and the nervous system is able to relax into parasympathetic, everything can heal, right? So, and again, longevity, what we're talking about is the ability to regenerate, the ability for the system to find coherence, to find stability, to find balance, right? And of course, this balance is dynamic, right? But it's able to sort of come back into neutrality. And so that's really the key. There's also things like, I'm totally blanking.
Brain
move your eyes back and forth. You move your eyes back and forth.
Rapid eye movement, like the.
I can't believe there's a total brain fart.
This didokinesia, is that it?
No, it'll come to me. But another great one is dynamic neural retraining system. And this is more of a conscious process where we're retraining the brain and the nervous system. So we can have limbic injuries, essentially. And these are sort of, like you say, traumas, but the brain is caught in this fight or flight mechanism, or even shutdown mechanism, where it's hypervigilant. It's so used to threat and danger in the environment. And this could be due to mold toxicity. It can be due to financial issues. It can be due to anything, but the body is kind of stuck in this threat response. And so we can actually recondition that. We can retrain that. So that can be a very effective tool. I mean, there's so many that don't even have names, to be honest. And so many that have been developed by individuals, and that's their unique modality that's kind of borrowed from a handful of different sort of thoughts and ideas. But really, I think the key with any trauma healing is to find a practitioner that you fully trust, and a system or a process that you believe in, because belief is a huge part of healing. And if you don't believe in what's happening, you're going to limit yourself as to what's really possible.
Wow, gosh, Jason Prall, you're amazing, and thank you so much for today's knowledge, wisdom, and insights. I mean, you've literally traveled the world, met with the oldest people in the world, and gleaned these insights that are really like very simple but profound. And so, I interviewed Ben Greenfield yesterday. So you're going to get like all of the biohacking strategies and technologies and
when you combine these two things, like when you combine those, like that's really where the magic is. It's the universal truths of what makes a human healthy. And then what can I do in this individual body, knowing that I'm unique from every other person? How can I sort of biohack my own physiology, my own brain, my own ideas, my own consciousness? How can I do that in a way that's going to exhibit the most health out of me?
Gosh, so good, Jason. Thank you so much. Where can they learn more about you? Where can they get access to all of your wisdom and knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, you can probably find me on various forms of social media, YouTube, and that kind of thing for anything else I've done. You can go to awakenedhealthacademy.com. That's where I have a lot of my the work that I've done and continue to do with regard to films and summits and other interviews and courses and that kind of thing. And they can also find my book on Amazon called Beyond Longevity. And it kind of gets into some of these things. It's kind of the core of what we talk about is what really creates health, and it's and some of it's foundational, some of it's pretty interesting. So that's probably the best place.
Jason Prall, everyone. Thank you so much, Jason. Appreciate you, brother.
Absolutely. Good to see you, Isaac.
Good to see you too.
Thanks for listening to the Longevity Leaders Podcast. Our Longevity Leaders community is on mission to transform 100 million lives by 2040. If you enjoyed this show, please share this with somebody that you know, especially another doctor or physician, but also click that follow button. Until next time, stay strong and live long.